now going to move on to our second keynote speech for this morning, which is from Christina Leber, Principal Data Software Engineer for iRobot. And Christina's been with iRobot for about 4 years, and she's also worked for Amazon and GE Research. And I must say that when I came into this hotel, I don't know if you came in on the lobby level and you saw that robot drifting around. Did you see that? He's got a tray, he, she, I don't know. I'm not sure whether robots can be he's or she's, but he's walking around with this tray of stuff. And the first thought that came to my mind was, oh, we're having somebody from iRobot. Is this a new iteration of iRobot? And it turns out it isn't. If you look closely at that robot that's drifting around, it's a Segway. So I thought that was perfectly fascinating. So what Christina is going to talk to us about this morning is how iRobot drives data trust at scale with data observability. So, Christina.
So thank you for the lovely introduction. I was not introduced, but my name is Scott Lerner. I'm a customer success manager at Monte Carlo, the data observability company. And I have the pleasure of working with the introduced Christina Leber here, who works at iRobot, principal data engineer. And we've had the pleasure of working together for the last year and a half, 2 years on their data observability journey, which has been a real pleasure watching them invest in data observability early and become one of our strongest customers. So thanks everyone for joining us today. As mentioned, Christina is a principal data engineer at iRobot, and per the introduction, for those unfamiliar with iRobot, they're a home robotics company that's become synonymous with the category due to the wildly successful Roomba vacuum, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, or some people refer to as DJ Roomba for Parks and Rec fans out there. Well, today we're going to talk with Christina about her journey with data observability to drive more reliable data. So without further ado, we'll jump into things. So mind if I ask you a few questions, Christina?
Go for it.
All right. Let's start with the basics. So what is role of data at iRobot?
Well, I specifically work on our product data lake team. That's the team that owns the data lake that has all of the data that comes off of the robots in the fleet. We use that data for everything from tracking error rates across the fleet to figure out what kind of issues we're having, to recommending to the customers how to use their robots to clean their homes more effectively. This data is used by everyone from data analysts, data scientists, program managers, et cetera, to both measure our product performance and effectiveness, as well as to inform our product evolution and make decisions about where we should go with it next.
It's super helpful. I think everyone here in the room respects how important data is to, I'm sure, every company here in the room and where you work. So on to the topic of today around data reliability. So how did iRobot solve for data quality before investing in data observability?
So before that, we did honestly a lot of manual things. We would do manual checks on our critical tables. We had built some dashboards to help monitor those tables and figure out like how many rows are being added in a given day and things of that nature. We had alerts on all of our jobs to let us know, did the job succeed or fail? And you know, in the absolute worst case, we've all been there where a data scientist or an analyst pings us and says, hey, the data in this table doesn't quite look right. Can you take a look at this?
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of people in the room have been working in data for a while, are familiar with those more manual checks and you know, having to go and check a dashboard. And when you do get that question of, hey, is this data right? Is this revenue data right? You know, like, or is it accurate? Going and do those more manual checks. So how was that working prior to data observability?
Well, as you said, it's manual, so it wasn't ideal. It would take a lot of time to go through and check that, and that takes away from developing other things that could be of value to our consumers. Both the checks themselves, but also building all those dashboards. That takes time, and then you have to remember to go check them, which is always a problem. Job alerts are great because they tell us, yeah, the job succeeded, the job failed. It does not tell us, though, that the job generated a bunch of bad data or that it didn't actually load anything, and then we have to go and look for that. And then, of course, as we all know, the problem with data consumers finding issues that it breaks trust. And if they can't trust the data that they're using to actually drive decisions or understand what's going on, then honestly, you've got a bigger problem on your hands than just data observability.
Yeah, for sure. We see that with a lot of our customers. You know, at the core of working in data is the end consumers and being able to trust that data. And when there's that break in the relationship of trust to the data, there's a real problem, specifically within organizations and data generally. So at what point did you decide to invest in data observability?
About 2 years ago, we were starting to look at where we were as a data platform and how we can continue to mature, and data observability was one of the things that rose to the top of that list.
For sure. And when you were considering data observability, which we're a new space, and I understand if some of you aren't even familiar with our space yet, when you were looking into different products, what were you considering, and how did you land on Monte Carlo, and what were some differentiators?
So one of the main things we were looking for was just something that was compatible with our environment. We have an AWS-based data lake with the data stored in S3, queried via Athena, and we needed a product that was compatible with that. We did evaluate open source solutions, but when we started looking at how much time it would actually take us to implement that throughout our data lake, it was just more time and developer resources than we were willing to commit. So we really wanted a vendor solution. Monte Carlo supported that infrastructure that I described, the S3 Athena infrastructure. A lot of the products out there that we had found were more focused on like a cloud data warehouse than a true data lake. So focusing on products like Redshift as opposed to S3 and Athena. And one of the other things we liked about Monte Carlo was that it's a pure data observability tool. A lot of the other things we found out there kind of wanted to be your one-stop shop for everything data. They wanted to be your ETL product, your data catalog, everything that you would need. And we had all of those things already. We just needed something that would do data observability. It also checks several other boxes for us in terms of both like automated out of the box versus custom monitors that we could build, automated baselines for things like null rates on certain columns, and automated data lineage.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And for those unfamiliar with Monte Carlo, a lot of what we're doing, is really the foundational work that your team has done to, do specific checks, but also do wide coverage on your data and notify end consumers and data engineers that when data issues do arise. So you'll get a Slack notification saying, hey, this table might be out of date. And so how does your team identify and resolve those issues that are detected by way of Monte Carlo?
Well, the first thing you have to do before you can even identify the issues is figure out what you expect your data to look like. If you can't define those rules and those expectations, it's going to be very hard to define the monitors and the things that you want it to look like. As you just said, Monte Carlo does provide some of that out of the box. It uses machine learning to try to figure out when should data tables update, what size should those things be, and there are other monitors that you can enable that will do things like I mentioned before of trying to automatically baseline what is generally the null rate for this column and then notify us if that changes. Then, as you mentioned, we have everything that going to Slack channels. If we have all of our alerts actually tag the table owner so that they will know, hey, something just went wrong on your table. Can you go take a look at this and see what's going on? Monte Carlo will provide some information for us about not only what it observed, but also what those trends were leading up to it. So using the example of null rates, if it tells me that data in a certain column, the null rate jumped, well, I can see, did that just increase over time, or did that spike suddenly? What's the actual problem? So I can go back and see what happened actually leading up to that. That then helps me understand what kinds of things I should be looking at in my data ecosystem and triage those incidents effectively.
Yeah.
It helps us kind of get in front of all of those things so that we see them first, not our data consumers.
Exactly, and that's why I've been so impressed working with your team over the last 2 years and really been a model customer of ours. It's the thoughtfulness of specific checks, having a strategy going and deploying a tool, especially one that's new in a new space like data observability, and then being very catered with the notifications and making sure that the right people are aware when data issues do occur. And it's really impressive to see, and definitely great work that your team has been doing. So. One last question. So obviously, data reliability is important to anyone who works in data. And so if you were giving advice to the room and you wanted one piece of advice, what would you give hoping to increase data reliability and trust in their data?
I would say the first thing to look at is, honestly, just like anything, define the problem. If you don't know where you are and what problems you're having, it's hard to then figure out what kind of solutions you need and where to start with implementing them. Like, what are the things that you do well today? What are the things you don't do well today? What are the things you really want visibility into that you don't have today? And then once you understand that, you can then figure out how to implement, a tool like, say, Monte Carlo. Then figure out where to start. At iRobot, we started by going through our data lake and looking at the dashboards and the applications we had on top of it and identifying what are the most critical data sets that we have, and can we start by just implementing data observability on those. So understanding what did we expect those data sets to look like, what kind of machine learning based things do we need, and also rules that we would define ourselves in SQL that Monte Carlo could run for us. That allowed us to both learn how to use the tool and to build effective processes around them. So you need both the processes to build out those monitors and identify what you need, but also how to respond to them. And it's easier to iterate over those processes when they're only applied to a small number of tables at first, rather than something that you've applied to, say, a few hundred tables, and then you have to go back and change everything. That's hard. So define the problem first, start small, grow from there.
Sage advice. So I appreciate that, and yeah, being very, very thoughtful and making sure you're successful early and then growing from there. It's been really impressive to see. So I know we are a short time here today, but I appreciate everyone letting us speak with you, and thank you, Christina and the iRobot team for sharing your thoughts. We're not going to be taking questions live here, but Christina and I will be both around today. So if you have questions around data observability or Christina's role, definitely feel free to come on by. I'll be at the Monte Carlo booth, so definitely come by at any point today. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.